Well, when I did Star Wars, I consciously set about to recreate myths and the classic mythological motifs. And I wanted to use those motifs to deal with issues that existed today.
1966 was the year of the big buildup. More than 200,000 American men and more than $2 billion American dollars per month went to the Vietnam War that year.
There are many ways to measure the American involvement in Vietnam, but in 1966, for the first time, was measured in terms of large-scale casualties.
By 1968, 500,000 American troops were in Vietnam, and they were losing 300 men a week.
Here in the United States, opposition to the war grew.
The United States is waging an unjustifiable war in Vietnam.
More than 50,000 Americans marched on the Pentagon and demonstrated at the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial.
The disgust at the war in Vietnam was very great. The first thing was it involved conscription.
This will make it necessary to increase our active fighting forces by raising the monthly draft call from 17,000 to 35,000.
Dissent is growing, and draft resistance in particular threatens the very life of America's giant war machine.
You see, the people in this country aren't fighting a Vietnam War. The government's fighting it.
We were being used, really, for God knows what purpose.
I have heard it said that some of the boys come back and they say, those people don't even want us there. So that makes you wonder, doesn't it?
So many people have to die, and it's a dirty shame. Families that are torn to pieces.
The notion I had was that the Viet Cong terrorized the Vietnamese population, forced them to fight against the Americans on the pain of death. What I began to understand in Vietnam was that all they had to do was let a Marine patrol go through a village, and whatever was left of that village, they had all the recruits that they needed.
In grade school, we learned about redcoats, the nasty British soldiers that tried to stifle our freedom. And I think subconsciously, but not very subconsciously, I began increasingly to have the feeling that I was a redcoat. I had become everything I had learned to believe was evil.
The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s against the man kind of thing.
Or a colonial, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats, don't know nothing. And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese. The irony of that one is, in both of those, the little guys won. And the big, highly technical empire,
the English Empire,
the American Empire, lost. That was the whole point.
But that's a classic, us not profiting from the lesson of history.
When I was in high school, I was a consummate underachiever. Took my very bad grades to a junior college and discovered social science. Became very infatuated with anthropology and found something that I really loved. I come out of anthropology.
I'm going to use this to attack you.
My focus is social systems.
Can you speak Bachi? Of course I can, sir. It's like a second language to me.
In science fiction, you got two branches. One is science, and the other is social. I'd started out in college as an anthropologist, but I'd always wanted to take mythology.
What you folks need is a hero.
And take the psychological underpinnings and motifs of mythology from all around the world, boil it down into things that seem to resonate everywhere in the world. I became good friends with Joe Campbell, who was also, looking at things from the anthropological side. I got involved with him. Joe Campbell was a comparative mythologist, and the Joseph Campbell angle really came out of my anthropology classes when I was in college. One of the things that I really got from Joe Campbell was that what he was trying to do is find the common threads through the various mythology, through the religions.
Our topic today is understanding mythology, and my guest is perhaps the world's foremost mythologist, Joseph Campbell, the author of The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Why the hero with 1,000 faces?
Well, because there is a certain typical hero sequence of actions which can be detected in stories from all over the world and from many, many periods of history. I think it's essentially, you might say, the one deed done by many, many different people.
In the early part of the 20th century, there was a guy named Joseph Campbell, and he was studying myths from all over the world. And he started noticing something similar in all these stories. Heroines and heroes from every time period were taking more or less the same journey. And he called this the hero's journey. Any way it goes, this person is now on an adventure, whether they like it or not. The adventure is full of challenges. Typically, there's a helper that comes to guide them along the way.
This reminds me.
They get magical powers, or maybe they get a magic weapon. They struggle.
Too short for a stormtrooper?
But finally, evil is vanquished. The Death Star explodes. The hero has been initiated from average person to hero person.
About 10 years ago, I set out to write a children's film. I had an idea of doing a modern fairy tale. Stumbled across A Hero with 1,000 Faces. I began to understand how I could do this. It was a great gift and a very important moment. If I don't, it's possible that if I hadn't run across that, I would still be writing Star Wars today.
Joseph Campbell said that all the great myths, the primitive myths, the great stories have to be regenerated if they're going to have any impact, and that you had done that with Star Wars. Are you conscious of doing that? Are you saying, I am trying to recreate the myths of old?
Well, when I did Star Wars, I consciously set about to recreate myths and the classic mythological motifs. And I wanted to use those motifs to deal with issues that existed today.
If we're to solve the problem that's confronting the world today, that we will develop a new mythology, that the old myths are no longer serving us.
There are two things that has to happen if you're going to have a mythology that's appropriate to man today. And one is to take the world of nature as it is known. And my God, I've been hearing recently about some of the things that the physicists and astronomers are finding out, and it is magical. And the second thing is to realize that the society with which you are involved is not of this group, that group, or this social class, or that social class, or this race, or that race, but the planet.
So what lessons do you think they're taking away from watching Star Wars?
One of the main themes in the film is having organisms realize that they must live together, and they must live together for mutual advantage. Not just humans, but all living things and everything in the galaxy is part of a greater whole. The Western was the last of the American mythology. The Western was the last time we sort of dealt with our culture and what we expect from our society and what the rules are.
You gonna let them do this to you?
Once we got past the Western, which was in sort of the late 50s, early 60s, the culture, which was the Vietnam War, the political situation.
Well, I'm not a crook.
That mythology was thrown out, and nobody decided to pass it on to the next generation. I said, I really want to do something in that old, taking what a mythology does, which is to inspire the next generation to carry on the same values that the last generation has had. All religions say one thing, which is love is the secret to the universe, which is compassion, which is love others, take care of others. So I see Star Wars as all of the issues that religion represents and trying to distill them down into a more modern construct. The struggle in Star Wars is passion against compassion, which is greed against giving and giving up primarily. And the whole issue is the flip side of greed is fear of losing. Once you start down that path of fear, then you're trying to protect things and you're willing to fight for things.
He could actually save people from death.
The story, the political backstory was written 30 years ago. It was written during the Vietnam War.
Boy, those bullets are close.
And in the Richard Nixon era.
For the second time in American history, Congress has passed the point of no return and committed itself to an impeachment investigation of a president of the United States.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
What these films deal with is the fact that we all have good and evil inside of us and that we can choose which way we want the balance to go. I'm on the side that says you should treat people decently. We're all in this boat together. Everybody's in it together. And we're going to all sink or swim together. And we haven't been doing a very good job over the last 10,000 years. All of my movies are about one thing, which is the fact that the only prison you're in is the prison of your mind.
Why do you think the Star Wars saga has marked the audience and crossed generations until today?
The film is such an institution, it's become so mythologized.
Star Wars may have started out as a mere movie, but it became a phenomenon.
That has actually changed our culture for the better and for generations to come.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
La guerre des étoiles.
You can't escape from Star Wars mania.
Star Wars is a phenomenon.
They've doubled the popcorn supply, the candy, the soda, the cups. They've added cashiers, doormen, vendettes, and ushers. And this is why. It's Star Wars, the blockbuster movie that's drawn massive crowds around the country and grossed an estimated $6 million at only 44 theaters across the country in the first 2 weeks that it ran.
The original earned $524 million.
3 years later came The Empire Strikes Back. It was another blockbuster, grossing $365 million so far.
And all over the country, Star Wars fans have been waiting in line for tickets to tomorrow's opening of Return of the Jedi.
We've been here for 6 days and it's great!
The hype surrounding this movie has been overwhelming.
It's like 1977. I haven't felt this since 1977.
It is a foregone conclusion this will be one of the biggest films of all time.
Now, here come the clones. As Sean Robinson found out, Star Wars fever is attacking the country.
Tonight, it's the long-awaited premiere of Revenge of the Sith. Can we hear it?
$59 billion. That's how much money the Star Wars franchise has made in its 28 years.
It is a cultural phenomenon and has become part of our vocabulary.
Was that the evil empire was about to launch the Death Star against the United States.
We would get requests from hospitals. There would be a child who would be dying. And they'd say, can we see the movie? Because he's not going to last the week. So we'd show him the movie, and he would live for another 6 or 9 months. And it wasn't once that this happened. It happened hundreds of times. And you just sort of say, well, whatever we're giving them, whatever inspiration we give them, allows them to take the struggle further.
But it's a lot about good and evil. It's a lot about heroes.
It's about good and evil, but heroes, what makes a hero? What's friendship? What's the idea of sacrificing yourself for something larger? They're all really basic things. They say, well, man, to make a movie about that, it's very obvious, but it's actually not. It's not that obvious to a lot of people unless you have somebody tell you every generation that this is what our country believes in. But this is what we believe in. And with Star Wars, it was, you know, the religion, everything was so taken and put into a form that was easy for everybody to accept. So it didn't fall into a contemporary mode where you could argue about it. It went everywhere in the world because they could say, oh, the things I believe in are the same as that.
The image, the mythic image, does not fit the contemporary mind. So the message can't get into the contemporary body. You've got to translate these things into contemporary life and experience. Mythology is a validation of experience, giving it its spiritual or psychological dimension.
I'm making films that are timeless, and they're about issues that have been around for 1,000 years. So the human condition, the same kind of struggle that each individual human being has to deal with, is a big issue, and it always will be.